First of all, I would like to begin with just thinking about the two previous webinars. This is the third webinar. We are going to talk about sex affective education. We are going to talk today about the children aged from 9 to 12 years old. So the idea of this project, which is co-founded by the European Union, it's to help adolescents and to share this project with Europe. I'm Berta Otero. I'm a psychologist and I'm going to tell you about the main and basic things to be taught and also some techniques that will help you at school, or for instance it can help you with your children or some other people who are around you and are aged from 9 to 12 years, and in which way you can go hand in hand with them and help them. So, today we are going to talk mainly about the different topics you can see on the screen. What is pre-adolescence? What changes occur? What contents are we going to use to teach them? How to teach them? Warning signs for you to identify them, some red flags, strategies for families to support them, activities, very practical activities, and some resources that might be helpful for you. So, first of all, pre-adolescence. You have learned a little about from 0 to 5, from 6 to 9. And today we are going to talk about how to teach to young children from 9 to 12. And this is pre-adolescence, which is the transitional stage between children and adolescence. And we have the first significant physical changes and psychological changes. It's the onset of the puberty. And so there's the development of the sexual organs. And this has some changes. There are psychological changes, social changes, and many others. It is important as well to mention that the group becomes more and more relevant. Why? Because they are a little bit farther from their families and they are acquiring some independence. They do not depend on the family for everything. They begin to wonder who they are. They don't understand themselves and they have questions, and they use the group to find the answers to these questions because they feel they belong to this group. We have sex divided groups, usually boys on the one hand, girls on the other hand, and they relate to each other through conflict because they have sexual identification of the group as well. And it is very important for educators. They can demystify the social gender roles. So, what kind of changes can we find regarding girls? First of all, increasing height, breast development from age to 13 years, growth of pubic and underarm hair, and the first menstruation. As you can see, there's some clock there because there's a scope. It changes, and some are changing, some are not. They wonder why this is happening to me and not to my friend, because there is not a specific age for this. There's always a scope. So changes for men. They also increase in height, growth of the pubic and underarm hair, the voice changes. They have the first ejaculation around 12 or 14 years old. It can happen before, maybe at 10 years old, or even later, around 16. And this first ejaculation can be involuntary, for instance, when they are sleeping, or by masturbation. So this is also it is also important to inform them, for them to know what's happening to them. Together with physical changes, we have as well some cognitive changes. Cognitive changes refer mainly to the development of more abstract thinking, metacognition. It's thinking about one's own thinking, ability to anticipate consequences, questionings of rules at school, in the family. They create their own critical thinking, and this is important to bear in mind when you begin to decide what you are going to teach to them. Well, I don't know. There's like some green lines there. I don't dare to touch anything, but if you can read it properly, I will carry on. Lately, we have some changes which are related to the emotional and social aspects. So, regarding the emotional aspects, they search for emotional independence, they construct their personal identity, they need some autonomy, they are more impulsive. Their emotions change a lot. They are quite intense emotions and apathy together. Relations are deeper and more meaningful for them. And they have the first romantic and or sexual interests. Well, this is the changes of the first of this stage, pre-adolescence. So if we take into account what's happening to them, what do we have to approach? So we have here a table with all the contents which are adapted to the different ages. And we would be talking mainly of this stage from 9 to 12 years old. If you, as you can see here, everything should be included except for prostitution. So this could be useful for you as a reference, because if you haven't done the other contents before, it is important to have reached them on this stage, and we have to take into account that a boy or a girl 9 years old is not the same as a 12 years old, so you have to adapt. These are the topics that we should have covered. Now, sexuality. We will have sexual contents and affective contents. For instance, if we have a kid which is between 9 and 12, they should have a knowledge about the human reproductive system, not only anatomy, but also functionality. So, an exercise you can do with them is, for instance, if you have a drawing like this one, and they can identify the different names. You can do that with different languages. They can do the drawing themselves. So they are familiar little by little with the different body parts. It is also important for them to understand what happens to them and what kind of changes they are experimenting. So, for instance, for girls, you can do some drawings as well for them to share the changes. They have the first menstruation, the breasts are growing, all the changes we mentioned before. And also, with the first menstruation, both boys and girls have to understand this cycle. They should know the different stages, how long it lasts, more or less. They should have a knowledge of what is the menstrual cycle for, symptoms, and the functionality of it. Regarding adolescents, they also have to know the different changes they are living, specifically because these changes can affect them, because there are many physical changes and not all will be at the same time and not for all. And this will, it is important for us to tell them so they don't get nervous. Together with physical changes, they have to understand human sexual response. To understand this, you, for instance, may have some graphics, you can tell them some stories, but this is very important for them to understand so they can understand later which are some other stages, for instance, what are sexual relations for. But if we don't understand, first of all, the human sexual response, we won't be able to understand the things that come after. And last but not least, it is very important to show them some basic knowledge about body hygiene guidelines. And we have to insist on this. And using the hygiene guidelines, you also can talk about some common sexual transmitted infections just in a general way. You don't need to talk about the symptoms or be specific about it, but you can tell them that there are sexually transmitted infections and they have to be careful. So, till now, we talk about the important contents regarding sexuality, but this is a sexuality and affection workshop. Let's talk about affection for these stages. Regarding affectivity, we can talk about different types of relationships. They have to understand the difference between what is a friendship relationship or a love relationship, and to understand which is the line that divides the different kinds of relationships. Also, the sense of belonging. We have to tell them that whether in the context you are living in, whichever context you are living, you belong to a family, you belong to a group of friends, you belong to a social group. And this will help them to create their own identity and to have this sense of belonging. Fertilization. They have to understand fecundation. They have to understand the different stages of pregnancy and how pregnant women are feeling and which are the cycles. For this, I will give you some videos and exercises that will make it more interesting for them. It is important as well for them to learn that as fecundation give place to a pregnancy, it is also for them to understand that there are contraceptive methods that will prevent that pregnancy, at least in a general way, so they can understand that they can have sexual relationships without pregnancy. They also have to understand the varieties of sexual behavior. It is not the same kissing as hugging, some more intimate contact. So, this wide scope of relationships will allow them to understand the kind of relationship they establish with different people. Last but not least, it's important as well sexual abuse, to prevent that and to prevent them being both victims and perpetrators, to talk about consent and so on. So this is all for affectivity, affection, but they have some key items to take with them. For instance, consent. It is very important to teach them. They have to understand the thing that they have to set boundaries. They have to learn to set boundaries, but also they have to respect other people's boundaries. So this is reciprocal. Regarding abuse and harassment, they need some guidelines to what to do in these situations. I have highlighted 1 and 2, which is to offer them the possibility to communicate, to talk to us. They don't have to keep silent. They can share that with you. So the first thing would be to talk to a trusted adult if they are feeling uncomfortable, if they are scared. They shouldn't be afraid to speak up if something doesn't feel right or they don't want to do it. It doesn't mean that when you say no, it means no. This is linking it with consent and that they are ever, ever obligated to give kisses or hugs to adults, even if they insist. And also, no adult is ever allowed to touch your genitals. Well, there are a few exceptions, for instance, in a medical checkup or just with consent and with someone you are with a trusted adult. It is important for them to take into account these guidelines so they can differentiate if there's abuse or there isn't. And now, related to abuse, it is important to talk about the 3 R's. 3 R's that determines a healthy relationship. This is a mnemotechnic rule, so they have to understand that the effective relationship has to be based on respect, responsibility, and reciprocity. Respect, why? Because if we are in a healthy relationship, we have active listening, we have empathy, we respect personal boundaries, both theirs and ours. Second R is responsibility. We are responsible because we can keep our commitments in a relationship. We are able to ask for forgiveness and we are able to forgive. And this means that we are mature. We have an open communication that we can express what we think, what we believe, and we have emotional responsibility. This means that we care about the other people's reaction about what we say and do. And then the third R is reciprocity. I mean, we have to give and receive in a relationship. We share with them and they have to share with us. There has to be a balance between sharing and giving. And we need a mutual support. I mean, if there are difficult times, we support the other person and we have support when we need it. That would be more or less the theory. How can we teach all of this in the classroom? For instance, we can tell them about true or false affirmation and they can identify if this is a relationship which is a healthy one or this is an abusive relationship. You can ask them to raise their hand, to tick them in green and right there. You have some examples, for instance, a healthy bond and unhealthy bond. You have some examples on the slide. Another thing which is quite relevant is to talk about bullying, cyberbullying, and sexting. The issue with these variables is that, well, it's very bad for their self-esteem. This is very common violence nowadays in schools. The issue with cyberbullying and sexting, it goes beyond the schools. So the kid is always being abused, is always suffering this kind of violence, even when he's not in the school. One second, please. You wanted to have a look at the previous slide. Can you see it? Anyway, I will make this presentation available to you. Just if you want to use it for some exercises, so you can take it with you. You don't need to take notes if you don't want. Okay, let me move on. Lovely. Thank you. So, moving on, we were talking about cyberbullying. Well, what do you have to do in this situation? First of all, you have to tell them that they have to talk about the bullying, cyberbullying, or sexting that they are suffering. And so, talking about which is the difference. Bullying is physical or verbal abuse on site. Cyberbullying is comments, humiliation through social media, and sexting is, for instance, when there's a vulneration to that person's privacy, for instance, disseminating pictures, or because they use AI of your picture, and for instance, it seems that you are naked there. Sexting is quite dangerous nowadays because all the things that we are saying. So, what should we do? First of all, create safe spaces for emotional expression of these students to tell you if they are suffering, and they have to be trusted in a trusted area. So, as well, to educate on the ethical and critical use of technology, to raise awareness of what we share, what is privacy, self-awareness, and self-esteem as protective factors, and as well to include the perspective of consent and respect in all kinds of relationships. Together with sexting, there's a topic that goes hand in hand, and it's pornography. Why I'm mentioning pornography? Some of you might think that it's too soon to talk about it, but unfortunately, data not only in Spain but at European level says that the first impact of pornography are around 8 years old, even consumption at 11 years old. And as the webinar goes from 9 to 12, it is important for you to mention pornography because it's the beginning when they are going to talk about this. Between 10 and 14 years old, 35% of minors consume pornography as normalized behavior. Between 13 and 18 years old, this percentage rises to 81%. So, this is a very fundamental topic, and we have to talk about it at school. I also wanted to highlight that 27% of adolescents have sent sexual images to peers. Sexting might not be pornography by itself, but they might see a picture of someone in WhatsApp, or it can be a meme, which is a bit pornographic, in social media. It can be direct, indirect, volunteer, or not voluntary. And anyway, on the social media, we find this kind of content. If we don't work on this in pre-adolescence, for instance, if they don't know about this, then we might find that in adulthood, 96 of men and 63% of women report having been exposed or consumed pornography. I mean, this is not a very hopeful situation, but it's useful to raise awareness and to inform educators as yourself that pornography is a social issue and we have to talk about it. What can you do to talk about it with your students? First of all, to tell them about the consequences of using pornography. It is very important for them not to confuse artificial pornography sex with standard sex, because if they learn from pornography, there will be consequences. Which ones? So, for instance, they begin with casual and sporadic sex with many people that they even don't know very well. Their sexuality is increased, um, increased sexual desire. They begin sooner. For instance, we say about 12 years old, first sexual encounters. They talk about this with unknown people. I then begin to imitate. So there are some expectations about what is a sexual relationship, but this will create false beliefs about sexual relationships. It is also important to highlight some other consequences. For instance, sexual aggression, violence, abuse. That means an aggressive sexual behavior, sexual relationship without consent. They understand that women don't need to say yes, and there are stereotypes as in pornography. Women are objectified, and this kind of relationship might be based on individual pleasure, and the physical relationship is the only thing that it's important, and unrealistic body standards with the in pornography. I mean, all the bodies we can see in porn are irreal, and apart of saying to them all these consequences of pornography, they have to understand that using pornography is like using any other substance. Our brain becomes addict. It becomes addict to tobacco, cocaine, alcohol, any other substance. But also it can be addicted to a behavior. Here we have the cycle of addiction, a simplified cycle of addiction. How does it work? At the beginning, we need a small dose to be excited. Or, for instance, when with alcoholism, with only one beer, one glass of wine is what we need. So, regarding pornography, we might need only one image, one video. But little by little, due to tolerance, we need higher and higher doses in order to achieve the same level of satisfaction, because we create tolerance and dependence. So, for instance, we need more violence, or we need more people in the video, or we need more aggressive content or violent content in the videos. All these variables makes that our brain will need more and more and more to get the same satisfaction. It's the same with alcoholism. Alcoholism, you need more and more drinks in order to have the same satisfaction. So this is a vicious circle, because when we don't use that substance, our brain is not satisfied, and then we don't use because it is satisfying us. We just use because we cannot stay without using, and we don't want to suffer. And so we have the same cycle of addiction. It's a vicious cycle. If we explain this to children, we may tell them that even if you are at the very beginning of an addiction, this may derive in serious consequences. It will affect your self-esteem. It will affect the way you interpret yourself, your sexuality, everything. So we should take advantage that we are in the previous phases, so to raise awareness on this issue. So we have talked what we have to talk about, changes, and the main topics that we are going to approach. And now we are going to talk about how to talk about it. What kind of strategies you can use for them to understand these contents better. First of all, avoid confusing sexuality with genitality. Usually, adolescents and pre-adolescents associate sexuality with genitality, with reproductive body parts. But sexuality is a wider concept and has to do with affectivity, about relationships, about intimacy. It's coming with us since we are very young children. Sexuality is not just sexual relationships. It has to do with the 3R that we mentioned before. So we have to demystify this. Aligned with this is to give importance to language. I mean, we have to use neutral language, formal language. We don't have to adapt to their slang or to the common words that they are using. We have to talk about sexuality with standard language. Third item, it is in bold. Why? It's because you have to work beforehand. You have to wonder before talking to an adolescent how your adolescence was. Think about that time. Think about your fears, people that harmed you, some topics that you didn't learn. Where did you learn? Who were the people who helped you? Those people who helped you, which elements have so you could trust them. So it is important for you to think about all these things so you don't make any mistakes between your fears and the fears of the children you are supporting. And this also allows you to adapt to the specific issue we are talking about here. Then objectivity, the fourth item. I mean, if we haven't done this personal reflection beforehand, if we do this, we will be more objective. We will not be using bias, and we will be focusing on what the children need to learn in this stage. We have to respect differences. So it can be very enriching. We have to encourage participation of all genders to see, for instance, let's ask to the girls, what do the boys think? What do you need now? What changes are you perceiving? And both of them have to understand the other. Dialogue, I think that this would be the most effective tool. How do you foster dialogue? Well, maybe you begin to talk about a topic and you ask them, what do you want to know about this? Or do you have any questions? Maybe they can write their questions and be anonymous about it. You might establish a hypothetical situation and ask them, what would you do in this situation? Or you can interpret a difficult situation, something they are afraid about, and how would they solve it? Participatory approach to promote responsibility and critical thinking. What I mean is, don't give them an answer beforehand. This is a toxic relationship or whatever. They have to understand what the concepts are, and they have to develop their own critical thinking. You just state a situation and they have to try to solve it with their own knowledge. And then please inspire trust. Try to be accessible for them. Try for them to feel safe with you, to feel sheltered. They have to feel that they can go to you to ask something. You have to be open minded and to listen to their needs. Well, sometimes there's group pressure and they are afraid or ashamed to ask you something, and they might need, for instance, to meet with you to ask you those questions. Well, this is how to talk about it. Some warning signals, some red flags that you might encounter in the classroom, and its meaning. So, if we have these signals between 9 and 12 years old, these signals might mean there might be a problem or an issue with this boy or girl's sexuality. For instance, alteration in the usual behavior. For instance, if they suddenly dress very differently from what they used to, or for instance, they talk in a language which is not appropriate for their age. Another thing is sudden changes in the mood, showing anger, fear, high insecurity. And also, it's quite important if they cannot sleep very well, if they sleep too much or too little, or difference in the way they eat, if they eat too much or too little. This can be a source of information for us. Also, if there's cyberbullying or if there's verbal or physical abuse, and if maybe they are the perpetrators and they have this might be related to sexual aggression, or if they show hatred to the LGBTIQ collective, or if they can talk about sexuality in a different context, or if they begin to be to engage in exhibitionist behavior, or the dresses or the way the clothes they use, for instance, are too revealing, or they are using mini skirts, for instance, for girls, or guys which are showing too much for the time of the year. This tells us they need to engage in exhibitionist behavior. They need to be looked at. Another thing is, for instance, if they talk about pornographic material without filters, or they share images of naked bodies, or if they show pictures with this kind of content as well. Some other warning signals that you can identify are, for instance, sexually explicit conversations with underage boys and girls, or if they, for instance, engage in sexual harassment or injuries to their genitals, to him, herself, or others. The presence of sexual transmitted diseases, you have to tell them if some of them have symptoms or not, so they can identify them. Pregnancy, for instance, as well, is a signal, or for them to witness or see sexual activity. I mean, these are red flags. These are things to pay attention to in order to identify issues. So I was focusing on educators and see how can you support adolescents. But as you are going to speak with the families, it's very important for you to give them some guidelines for them to be able to talk about sexuality in the daily life. So here we have some strategies you may use. We have, for instance, you can use them when you talk to them or when you talk to the parents, to tell them how to talk to their children in a natural way about sexuality. And there are 12 strategies here. For instance, to have books at home. I will give you some examples later on so you can recommend these books. So to have this kind of books so they can look at them, they can ask about them. Or also when you are watching movies, you can comment on situations or the kind of relationships or the kind of characters in the movies. To use music and songs to see the kind of language about sexuality, to ask them what kind of music do you listen to, what do you think this means, Many artists today usually have a context which is highly sexual, so we have to raise awareness from there. Also, if they have younger sisters, you can take advantage of baths, beaches, pools, or just telling them about body parts, anatomy, so they see this content little by little. You have to tell them that they are the best model. I mean, the way these families, the parents, the way they talk about sexuality, this is what their children are going to learn. They are models for them. So it is not just saying, you have to show them which is the relationship in marriage, what is a healthy relationship. The children learn by observation at home. Also, you have to do a contract for technology. As I was saying before, smartphones or computers are the first source for sexual content. So we have to make an agreement with them about the time of using smartphone or computers, or also some parental control. I will give you some examples later on. As well, you have to talk individually with your children, because they have different ages, they might have different questions, so there's not one measure fits all, because there are some things you have to talk with your children who's 6 years old and to your children who are 15 years old. And then as well, you have to take into account that this is a long distance race. This is for the long term. Sexuality develops in all the time, from when you're young children, young adults, and so on. So you have to think about this in the long term. You have to be constant. You have to be with them, and this is going to be a long process. Okay? We have talked about what to say, how to say it to the families. Now, some activities for the classroom. So this is more fun and more pragmatic. These activities, for instance, these activities will teach them about non-verbal communication. So you divide the group into pairs, and they have their eyes covered. And the teachers should tell them, for instance, how would you show affection? How would you greet the other person? Or how would you say a sad farewell? How do you show submission? Dominance, so you can see which is the non-verbal behavior of your students, and they can get information, and you can build and rebuild the different concepts on affectivity with them. Well, the three other exercises that you may use, for instance, to talk to you about the different parts of one's body, you can use maps, and they can just identify the different parts of the sexual parts. And another thing is to ask them, how do you call this? And so with this exercise, you can identify the different body parts of the other gender. And so this raises awareness about the body of the other, and they can use natural words, and you can adapt to their vocabulary as well and get to know it. Second exercise would be a brainstorm. Just you choose a topic, the topic you want to work with them on that day, and then you may see what are their needs, which are their thoughts about this topic, For instance, if you talk about fecundation or what it is pregnancy, and you can see which is their level of knowledge, and so you can adapt, and among everyone you can create a definition. You may have the key elements of that topic. And the third exercise would be, what do those lyrics say? As I mentioned before, music is something very useful for us. We can use songs that have sexual content, and they can say, for instance, what kind of gender roles are being created by this song? What do you think that, how this song is portraying women or men? What kind of relationship might be among these two people? Might be a friendship or an affection relationship, dominance relationship. They have to identify the relationship. And so, with some content which is quite familiar to them, you can work on these topics. In order to talk about pregnancy, you may use videos. You have some examples here. They are very visual, and they can imagine the development during the pregnancy, from the embryo to the newborn, everything. There are two videos here you may use, and there's another activity which is for them to have an interview with a pregnant woman. You you prepare some questions that they will ask to the pregnant woman. For instance, how are you feeling? Which are your symptoms? What does it mean, the pregnancy, to you? In which stage of pregnancy are you? What are you waiting for? In this way, it would be more personal, and we break the myths about pregnancy. They connect with a more personal relationship with a pregnant woman. After the interview, we can share the answers, and this could be a general discussion in the classroom about pregnancy and fecundation. To talk about the menstrual cycle, there are videos, education videos. I have offered you these two examples, but you can also use, I don't know, brainstorming, drawings, or generally speaking, would be to demystify these contents, and for them to understand that they are going to live it, and for them to understand that this is what's happening to the classmates. Some books that you may recommend both to your student, for the families, and for yourself. For instance, to talk about pornography for students, these two videos. On the left hand side, good images, bad images. This is good for children from 10 to 13 years old. And with this, they might see what kind of images you will see on the smartphone and the computers, what are the impacts of these images. With the youngest one, you can work on pornography with this. This is very visual and easy to read. The second book here is for kids to understand about the addiction of porn and its consequences, as we mentioned before. What can you do with these books? You can also can print some chapters, and you can read them together in the classroom, or they can read them at home, and then you comment it at the school. You can use it to see and to check if they are understanding it. That's regarding pornography. Regarding sexuality, for instance, this book on the left hand side, Please Talk Me About Love, that is for children from 3 to 12 years old. And it is useful for you to understand how to explain to these children the different sexual stages and how to talk to them adapting to the different ages. The second book on the right hand side, Sex and Now What? This is for adolescents, for them to understand the physical changes, their emotional changes. I don't know, it's kind of relationships, and it has content which is adapted from 9 years old. So I do recommend this book because it's really adequate for what we want to work today here. Regarding prevention of sexual abuse, this book works on consent. And so children understand how to establish boundaries, how to ask for respect, and they have to be responsible for their own body. They have to respect the body of the others. And if you have to talk about sexual abuse, this book is really useful. And then for parents, I recommend you these three books. We can talk from the left hand side, The Art of Teaching How to Love, to teach them about affective education, how they can express them at home, how they can teach about it, and how they can talk to their children. Then, for some uncomfortable questions that you will face, this is the second book, and it's Our Children Want to Know 60 Questions About Sexuality. And here we have the questions, and they're adapted responses to the different ages. And the third book is Let's Talk About Sex with Our Children. It tells about the different stages on sexuality and how to talk with them about it. You have some other online resources because there are parental filters for sexual content, and they can use it on the computers, on the smartphones, and there are all kinds. And well, more or less, that's my presentation. I hope that everything is clear now, but if you have any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer them. I'm glad you like it. Thank you. You see my email there on the slide, just in case you have any question. And I will also send you the presentation. Just for instance, if you want to scan the QR or if you want to have a look at the books, so you can see it at your own pace. Thank you for all the comments. Well, there's videos. The videos are in YouTube, but I will add the links to my presentation so you can just click on the link and then it's easy to find them. Okay, someone is asking, how are you going to handle the presentation? Well, I will give my presentation to Álvaro de la Cruz, who is the coordinator, and he will send it to you. Okay. And next webinar, we've talked about pre-adolescence, and now in the next webinar we will talk about adolescence from 13 years old to 18 years old and onwards. Well, it is very important for you to see that everything we have been talking about today will be useful for that stage. So adolescents know something about pornography, affectivity, sexual relationships. So with Borja, you will get more into detail, but this is like a stepping stone for your next webinar. Yes, I will send the presentation. I will share with you the presentation. Yes, this presentation has been recorded, so you will have access to it. It will be available for you. That's great. So if there are no question, can you hear me? So how can we access the recording of this presentation? Well, I will send the recording to Álvaro de la Cruz. Álvaro de la Cruz was the one in the first presentation, and he's got your email, and I think he will upload it to the platform, to our website, and he will inform about it by email. Will he send us an email? Yes, I think so. He will send you an email to the registration email you used, and he will send you the link to the recording. They will be uploaded to our website. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, that's great. So if everything is clear, so if there are no more questions, next webinar will be about adolescence. You have my email if you have any comment or if you need anything, please do tell me.